All right. Well, hey, we will go ahead and get started here this morning. So, welcome everybody this morning. This is week 2 of working through our Constitution, updates to our existing Constitution that led to the new draft of this Constitution that we have here. So, I'm going to do a little bit of a recap from last week. Cover just kind of the goal, the mission, the purpose, what we're aiming to do here, and then today we're going to focus on kind of the middle section of the Constitution. And by the way, if anybody needs some, there were drafts available in the back there. So today we're going to cover the membership, and then Bill is going to be covering the governance structure, what we're looking at. So again, just our goal with the updates that we're bringing to the Constitution were to be biblically in line. We're looking to keep the mission and the purpose is the same. That's not changing, but just the process of how we go about doing that is some of the parts that we're updating, and we're looking at what would work better now, what would work better, or what would stand the test in 10 years when it may be a completely different group of people sitting around the table. And also what would potentially we would hope work in 50 years. Part of what our aim to do is just to bring more clarity, more organization, more clarity for who's responsible for what, for when, be able to function well as what God intends in the changing culture that we live in. It's changed a lot since 1949 when the former draft was put together. So we want to be able to stay in line with what God intends in the midst of that culture, and care better for people. At times people fall through the cracks, and we believe that some of these changes will enable us to be able to care for people better. So the bottom line with all that is we believe these changes will allow us to better fulfill our mission as the body of Christ. So last week, Pastor Aaron taught, I did kind of a broad overview, and then Pastor Aaron taught on the doctrinal statement more on the spiritual side of things. So we had a couple questions that came at the end of that with a little bit of the question and answer time that we had. So I'm going to let him just give a quick follow-up from that, and then we'll get into the next section.
My follow-up will take about 30 seconds. We discussed as a board just a little bit some of those questions in particular to secret societies. And we thought, why don't we make sure that you as a church know that if you look in the new Constitution, that segment where that statement is, there's a bunch of scriptures that follow that. Would you please take time this week to read those scriptures and ask that question of how do these scriptures apply to this situation? And then when we come back for next week's question and answer, if you have further questions, we'll be happy to answer any of them. And then we do have the discussion forum on the 16th. But mainly, I just wanted to encourage you, check out the scriptures that are in that section, read over them, ponder them, study them in relationship to secret societies and being linked with unbelievers, and then we'll follow up from there. So, thanks.
So today, mainly what we're doing here is teaching more, and then there is papers in the back if any of you have questions. I don't expect to have much time at the end to do question and answer today, but if you do have questions you'd like to submit, you can put them in the offering box at the back, and we'll have a little bit to cover next week, and then the majority of the time will be question and answer. So I'm going to ask you to, if you have your new Constitution with you, open up to page 12. We're going to work through the membership section. I'm sorry, page 6. Pages 6 to 12 is the membership. They're not numbered? Okay. So it will be Article 5, if you can find where Article 5 is. That's where it begins with membership. So I'm just going to basically I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I'm going to do an overview here. And we do, again, ask that you all would take time and read this, get familiar with it. Much of what is in this section is pulled from the original Constitution. Some of the wording's updated a little bit. But then there is a few sections that are mostly new. So the first section, section 1, in the membership here is purpose and requirements. Most of this was pulled pretty closely from the original Constitution. So I am going to read the purpose. And this is the purpose of membership. Church membership is an outward sign to the local church and community that a person is committed to the fellowship and leadership at that church. Members are expected to contribute to the work of the church by using their God-given spiritual gifts. Church membership has a higher level of ownership, connectedness, involvement, and responsibility than church attendance. At times, at any given point in time, you have lots of church members and you also have attenders. And basically, what this explains here is membership is kind of that committing to being in agreement with the body of Christ that you're connected to. And it is a higher level of ownership, but also, kind of more importantly, if you can envision if you didn't have a document such as this, it would leave a lot of things open to interpretation. So, by having the membership and by having the document that you can agree on, it gives that platform of, yes, we're committed to this. This is how we see, whether it's the doctrinal statements, or this is how we see the Christian living. This is how we see to put that into practice and to live that out. So this goes along with the purpose of the membership. Qualifications. Those who wish to become members shall be persons who have been baptized as believers in Jesus Christ, who agree with the doctrinal statement and church practices as stated in Articles 3 and 4 of this Constitution, and who are willing to accept the responsibilities of church members as stated in this Constitution. So the other two parts to the purpose and requirement section here is application and approval. Those are similar to what we had before, just updated a little bit. The approval, the process is updated there. So we'll move into section 2, the kinds of membership. This is mostly new. Some of this, it's just explained with more clarity. You'll see kinds of membership. You have active members, basically members who are 16 years or older and who are in attendance of at least half of the regular weekend worship services in a year. Inactive members would be missed more than half or otherwise inactive in the ministry. And we never had this spelled out previously, but this gives active members, they have the privilege to vote. Inactive members, if they're not committed to the ministry, if they're not active, if they don't have a know of what's going on and everything, then they don't have the ability to vote. So basically, if you haven't showed up for a couple of years, you can't just come and vote on whatever it is that we have coming up to vote on. New thing on the next part there is junior members. This just changes, basically just clarifies if you're under 16, you can be a member. It's once you reach the age of 16 that you would be able to be a voting member is the main thing there. Then D, annual review. So at times now, I know the list does get reviewed, but there's no actual process in place that says, hey, this is when you do it, this is how you do it. So this is just bringing clarity to that. It's 2 months before each annual meeting. The elders shall review the membership list. You can read on further what all that entails. But so that's, again, it's just kind of naming the process for, whether it's us who are in leadership now who have an idea about this, or someone who's walking in that's already spelled out and easy to understand. So we'll move to the next section, section 3, ending membership. Yes?
The junior membership, the third sentence, junior members who reach the age of 16 shall be approved as active members. Is that age 16 correct in there? Should that not be 18 or?
I think 16 is what we were thinking with that. Is that correct, Bill?
Well, they become active members though at the age of 18. Am I reading that incorrectly?
Yours says 16?
Yeah, mine says 16.
Oh.
That way it says 18 to hold an office. But then when you look down at section C, it says junior members who reach the age of 16. Well, they become junior. Okay,
You have to be 18 to hold an office, but you can become a full member at 16. And you can vote at 16, but you can't hold office until you're 18, because then you're of legal age and so forth. But
Is that clear? Okay. Okay, so at the bottom so it'd be Article 5, Section 3, at the bottom of page 7, mine's numbered, is ending membership. This is mostly new, and this just kind of, again, outlines the process update. By request, a member may voluntarily end membership by notifying the Council of Elders. I won't read the rest of that, but encourage everyone to, again, read over it all. Flip to the next page at the top, ending membership for discipline. A member who's been placed under church discipline by the Council of Elders who has not responded in a positive manner may have his or her membership terminated by the Council of Elders after due process and notification as outlined in Section 6. Then unless there are other circumstances that would warrant immediate termination for legal reasons. Next one's letter C, for neglect of assembly. An inactive member may have his or her membership terminated by the Council of Elders due to neglect of assembly after a year as an inactive member. This was came into place as kind of guidance from legal understanding of if they're not active, that it's basically it's no reason for them to be considered a member to have the privileges in that way. Restoration to membership. A person whose membership has been terminated by the Council of Elders may be joyfully restored to membership by the Council if the person returns to a faithful Christian walk and fellowship in the church. Such a person shall be required to attend membership classes and interviewed by the Council of Elders before being restored to membership. So those are the first 3 sections there. We'll move into Section 4 here, member privileges. So this is, for anybody that is familiar with our current Constitution, this would be part of what is looked at as the role of the congregation. It has overlap with the congregation section in our existing Constitution. So I will read through some of this. Membership does not afford any individual with any property or contractual or civil rights relative to the church. The church's property, while open to the public for the church's ministry, remains a private property of the corporate body. Then it names a few people there that are authorized to deal with people who may be trespassing or need to be dealt with in that manner, who they have the authority to suspend or revoke the right of any person, including members, to enter or remain the property, may declare them as trespassers if they enter. So these are all things that you hope don't ever have to be looked at, but they're here, that it spells out the process of what you do if we need to. Letter B, members upon request shall be given copies of prepared financial statements of the church and meeting minutes of various bodies within the church. And I think Bill is going to be getting to the elder section here in just a bit, but I believe the part of that's still in there is how we do now. We publish the minutes like from our council meetings at every month. That, I believe, is still the same. That's listed in the elder section. So what I explained last week is, one of the things that we're moving toward here is basically like the authority structure is the congregation has certain things that they're in authority over, and then the Council of Elders would have certain things that they're in authority over. And this is the list of things that's mostly similar to much of what if you have been a church member, this is very similar to what you would have been voting on already. So selection of elders, adoption of the annual general operating budget of the church, acquisition of real property, disposition of all or substantially all of the assets of the church, merger or dissolution of the church, obtaining of any indebtedness, amendments of the Articles of Incorporation and Constitution of the church, calling or removing a pastor, affirming candidates for ordination, or other matters in which Council of Elders seeks the members' advice and counsel. So this is, again, that's basically every active member. Those are the things that they would have the right to vote on. Next section on the next page there is the duties of the members. This is very similar to the existing. There's a section in our existing Constitution that has all of this. I'm not going to get into much of that in order to give Bill time to go over his part here. But then Section 6 is the discipline of members. And I will read the purpose of this. There is a section of this in our current Constitution. This is similar but updated. It's just spelled out. It's basically, as far as the biblical side of it, it's the same that way. It's just spelled out in a little bit different form, but the process there is Section B. I'll let you read through that on your own, but I will read the purpose. Section A, or letter A there. The purpose of church discipline is to glorify God by maintaining purity in the church, by protecting believers, by deterring sin, and by promoting the spiritual welfare of the offending believer by calling him or her to return to biblical standards of doctrine and conduct. Furthermore, upon joining this church, all members are in agreement with Article 7 of this Constitution. That's binding arbitration. So that is just, again, it lays out the process for what that discipline looks like. And, if anyone who's not familiar with when you hear church discipline, it's kind of, my first thing is you hear the axe coming down sort of thing. But if, by Scripture, when you look at that, if you study it and understand the process, it's actually I believe, a grace-filled process that it has it starts one-on-one, and then two people would interact with the person, and then it would go to the Board of Elders and then to the greater church if it goes to that. But it's, basically in my point of view, it's really an act of grace that the Lord, that maybe we see from the words of Jesus in Matthew 18 that he highlights of how to deal with that. So Article 6 then on the next page, membership meetings. I'm just going to highlight a couple things here then and turn that over to Bill. So we had things in our old Constitution that basically, if a meeting was going to happen, should give such and such notice and so on. So this is pretty similar to what we had before. There's a few timing changes. I think there's one or two things that are now 10 days instead of 2 weeks. Special meetings. I'm trying to remember. Bill, which one was it that is, okay, just the notice and the requirement down there at Section 4. Notice shall be given no less than 10 days prior. The annual meeting, that's still 30 days in advance. But like I said, I won't get into all the details of that, but be sure to read over that to be familiar with it. Most of that is very similar to what we had before. One of the things that's different with this new proposed Constitution, the order of business would be set by the Council of Elders, and if someone has something they want to add to the order of business, in order to be prepared and not have things off the cuff, so to speak, at a meeting, they would be required to submit that at least 2 weeks prior to the annual meeting to be reviewed with the elders. 2 weeks prior to the annual meeting or 1 week prior to a special meeting. So with that, I think that mostly covers membership and what that looks like. And I know this is an exciting subject, so bear with us here, and I'll hand it over to Bill.
I guess when you think of a constitution, this is the part that you usually focus on, and yet as part of the committee that I understand I missed the beginning of the session last week, so I didn't hear, but I did want to make sure that, and I understand they were acknowledged, but that our committee that worked on this, Stan Heinzelman and Debbie Eckstein-Wildner and Dave Lawver, put in a good bit of time on the overall Constitution, and I would especially mention that Dave Lawver put in an awful lot of time researching different constitutions, and so while you notice that this version is, 20-some pages long versus the 6 that we had before, we added a few things from a lot of other constitutions, and he was the one that really found a lot of those extra things that we added, as well as the Freeze template that the church had purchased to follow in not only the Constitution, but also in other things as we progress here in the coming months and years. But on the church governance part, or the structure of our church, this is what we are looking at having as an outline of the structure in terms of a graphic form, with Jesus Christ as the head of the church, as is a biblical principle we want to follow, definitely, with the council of elders under that, but also the congregation, because as Ryan just outlined, there are certain actions that the congregation alone has the authority to authorize, as that list that Ryan just went over in the last article. But a lot of the authority is given to the council of elders, which is composed of the pastors and non-pastor elders. And so the proposal is that the council of elders would essentially be what analogous to in a corporation, the board of directors of the church. And so they will be making the decisions and guiding the church from in the day-to-day business of the church, like a board of directors would in a corporate setting. And the spiritual qualifications are outlined there in the text of the Constitution, and that they are, in the interest of time, I won't read them because I think they're ones that you're pretty familiar with. And as we go through this, I have here, as we go through the duties there in section 3, they really reflect a lot of the things that are reiterated in those 2 scripture passages as well. And if you go back to those scripture passages, though, if you read over them, the 2 are very similar in what they're outlining, but they are definitely a high calling, and ones that I think if most of us are honest, we cringe as whether we qualify for that or not, and meet all those qualifications, and so but they are, on the other hand, while they are a high calling and a high standard, on the other hand, they are, for the most part, things that all of us should be aspiring to. And so what we're really looking for is men who are mature in their faith and are walking in their faith and really serious about carrying out their faith. And so those are the type of people that we are looking for to choose as elders of the church under this Constitution. So their duties are to shepherd the flock, and as I was thinking of describing that a little bit, I guess, and we don't really have shepherds here in our way of agriculture currently, but I think what I understand of how shepherds operated, they both led the flock, but they also at times maybe were at the back prodding and pushing from the rear as well. So it's a little bit of both leading as well as prodding and pushing to move the flock in the direction that they feel is the best way to go. But it's also definitely a principle of leading through example, which is relative to the qualifications that we just discussed of people who are following in a good Christian walk. Teaching and exhorting, of course, that's going to be, not all the elders are necessarily going to be as equally involved in the teaching and exhorting as the pastors will be, but on the other hand, there is the expectation that there would be some of that function as well from the elders. Refuting those who contradict the truth, of confronting when there are issues of things that are taught or done in the church that aren't in line with Scripture, that these are the people that are going to be watching out for that and trying to keep things on track. Managing the Church of God, of just making sure that things are done properly and in good order. Praying for the sick, that is a function that's not really mentioned in these two verses or these two passages that we just referred to under the qualifications, but it's something that comes from the passage in James 5, is it? Where James says that those who are sick should call for the elders to pray for them. And then also to set the vision for the church, and that actually I don't think that's not listed in the Constitution itself. These others were taken directly from the Constitution there in Section 3, but I think as some of the other verbiage there in Section 3 relate to setting the vision for the church. And then also, on the other hand, the elders do not have individual authority. Their authority comes from as a group of elders, and that they are acting as a group, not individual people that have authority. The Council of Elders will also be the group that will create, hire, select, dismiss, and set the salaries for the staff, like a board of directors would. And so when there are staff positions, they would be the ones that would be creating those positions as well as hiring the people and dismissing them if need be. Now, I do have with the congregation there, because for the pastors and for other ministers, the Council of Elders will be coming to the congregation to approve those candidates. But for the most part, that process will be something that the council will take care of. On the selection in terms of service, which is Section 4, the first point there is that it will be a group of men, as is outlined in the Scriptures. Not only that it be men, but also that it be a group. Again, as was pointed out in some of our discussions earlier, the emphasis is not to be on an individual person or individual pastor or an individual, any one of them being in charge, but it is as a group they are acting to direct the church. We are providing that instead of being a set number like we have now, that we have, the Constitution specifies that there was 4 deacons. If the congregation reached, I think it was over 350, they were to add another deacon for every 70 members. This is going to be a little more fluid and adjustable, as what the council feels that if they need more people on the Council of Elders, that this Constitution just specifies that there has to be at least 5 people on the Council of Elders, which includes the pastors, and that there has to be a majority of non-pastors on the board, on the Council of Elders. So in other words, currently we have 2 pastors, Aaron and Joel, so 3 would be, that would be at least 3 other elders, and that would be a majority on the board that way. So we would have to have at least 5. In other words, that 5 is a number that's set in stone, so to speak, or on paper. So that would be the number, but we expect that it will be increased beyond that, and it's flexible as the need arises, whatever the council sees as a need. The non-pastor elders will be elected for terms of 4 years each, and they will be serving 2 terms before they would be required to take a rest of at least a year before being returned to the board. Hopefully this wouldn't be an issue, but the members of the council can be dismissed by the other elders by unanimous decision of the other elders if that would be something that would be necessary. On the selection process, that I didn't know how large that was going to come out on the screen, but I listed the steps that are involved, and as was alluded to last week, it is a little more involved than what we do now. But it begins, I believe, 4 months before the annual meeting. First, the council will first determine if they want to add new elders to the board at that point in time, or to the council. So that, as I said, there has to be at least 5, but if they decide they want to add more, they can add more. And but the thing that needs to be decided is if there are people that are already on the board and their terms are expiring, then they have to determine if they're up against the 2-year limit, then they will have to be naming a new person. If it happens that the persons whose terms expires, if they're willing and able to serve another term, then the question that goes before the congregation will just be a yes or no, whether or not that person continues for another 4-year term. So it could be that it will just be that they'll see that, well, we have one person that's going off, we don't feel we need another new one, so it will just be a yes or no vote on that person. If they do need new people, then they would appoint a nominating committee of 3 of the elders, and the congregation would be asked to give, or be given 30 days to suggest names to be considered for selection as a member of the board of the, I keep saying board of elders, elder council. The committee will then review and interview those nominees, and the committee will then make any recommendations if they feel any of those people are worthy of being recommended, or that it would make, that they feel they should be recommended, that they will recommend them to the council. The council can then just review those recommendations, or if they want to interview them, they could do that as well. And I did want to point out too that this is designed to be somewhat flexible from the standpoint of not only recognizing, I think, the need for elders on the board, that's part of the equation, but also the ability to, if there are people in the congregation that are recognized as being somebody that would be helpful to add to the board, that, in other words, it's recognizing the gift that people see in people. And so, if the board might actually only be looking for one person, but if they get 2 nominees that they feel would really be good, they might choose to go ahead and recommend 2 people. So we are putting a provision in there that only 2 close relatives would be allowed. That's 2 brothers, a father and son, so that there isn't any accusations of family dominance, which can be a problem in a church like ours. Not as much today as what it was 10 or 20 years ago, but we did decide to put that. That might be a wise thing to put in there. The congregation is given 30 days to consider nominees, and if there's any objections, you are to go not only to the Council of Elders, but also to the nominee if there's something in their life that you think they should not be considered as an elder. Then there will be a 3/4 yes/no vote at an annual meeting on whether or not to confirm those recommendations as an elder. And so it isn't going to be an election like we currently now sometimes have of 2 people vying for one position on the board. If there's 2 people on the ballot, it will be yes or no for either one of them. So both of them could be chosen or just one of them. So it won't be an election per se as much as a confirmation vote, similar to what we do for candidates for pastor. If somebody is recommended to be appointed to the Council of Elders and by chance they do not receive the 3/4 majority, then the council will have the opportunity to nominate somebody else. The council also is going to be able to fill any vacancies, but they would be filled just till the next annual meeting and by somebody who has previously served as an elder. If there's more than the 5 elders on the board already, they might elect just not to fill the vacancy too. It requires that they have monthly meetings that are open to members like our council meetings are now. They elect a chairman, a vice chairman, and a secretary. And as you will notice that the chairman of the Council of Elders also is the person that presides at congregational meetings as well. Everything needs to be decided by a 3/4 majority of the whole council, but also by a majority of the non-pastors members. And actions are reported to the members like we do now with the minutes being made public. Another new feature that we have used sometimes in actuality here already is that we are officially recognizing the people that have served on the Council of Elders but are no longer in office as still being recognized as elders of the church. They are just considered non-serving elders of the church, and that the current Council of Elders is free to consult with them on issues or questions that they might have about things going on in the church. And we have done that. Just this past year, we called in several former deacons and council members on some issues to consult with the council. Next, we move on to the section, Article 8, on the pastors. And of course, the pastors are elders as well, and so they fall under the same qualifications. They are members of the Council of Elders. The lead pastor, as you might guess, is that his primary role spelled out in the Constitution is to be a teacher of the Word, and it also specifies that the Council of Elders is to make sure that he has time to do that, so that he isn't burdened down with other responsibilities and tasks. For the equipping of believers and for evangelistic efforts as well. But while his primary role is the teacher of the Word, he is also to give general oversight and vision and set the vision for the church. In essence, if in a corporate setting, he is to be the CEO of the corporation of the church and to direct that the staff will report to the pastor, although we do envision that with an executive minister in place, that hopefully the executive minister will take care of a lot of the burden of directing the staff on a day-to-day basis, but in the lead pastor is still the CEO and at the top, where the buck stops, so to speak, if you use that terminology. We are also proposing associate pastors, although we are envisioning a limited number of associate pastors. In other words, we would not be looking at youth pastors and children ministries ministers to be as pastors per se. They would be ministers like we have had in the past, and on a not in a pastoral role. So there would be the lead pastor and maybe one or two associate pastors to assist the lead pastor, and that their specific roles would be defined by the council. The pastoral selection process is very similar to what we do now. The candidates would be reviewed or interviewed by a search committee or the council. If the council decides that they want to be the committee themselves, they can do that. The council selects the candidate. The council and administration team negotiate the compensation package, and then the candidates are presented to the congregation for a 3/4 approval. The Constitution provides that annually the Council of Elders, the non-pastor elders, evaluate the pastors. And on the tenure of pastors, this specifically provides that the pastors can be removed by the Council of Elders. They can also be removed by, if there's a 1/4 of the members that petition the Council of Elders to call for a vote of removal for the pastor, they can do that, and it would need to be approved by half the majority of the members. That's a little bit different than it would not be a vote of confidence like we currently have. There would not be an automatic 3-year vote of confidence like we currently have. And it actually is a higher threshold than what we have now. Under our vote of confidence system, if a pastor who is brought for a vote of confidence, whether it's a routine one or a special one, if they don't get 2/3 of the vote, they are out of office. This is requiring that they have to have half the vote against them. In other words, in a vote of confidence, they have to have 2/3 of the vote in favor of them. So if they have 1/3 of the vote against them, they are out of office. So it's a very low threshold, actually, that we currently have. So this would be a higher threshold to remove the pastor. Our current Constitution also provides that a pastor that leaves would have to give at least a 3-month notice. This provides that if a pastor is voted out of office, that there would be a 1-month notice and period of pay for them. Are we till 1/4 after, or okay? So, are there any questions on what we've gone over so far? Okay, the next section is where I think there's some confusion because we are following a biblical pattern of elders and with deacons. Under the deacons, deaconesses, and ministry staff, we are looking at creating, this is somewhat of a new thought process or way of looking at church leadership, I guess, from what we have. And so the deacons and deaconesses are the servant ministers carrying out the church's ministry. And their spiritual qualifications are, again, from Scripture, and the basis for the office of deacon is outlined in Acts 1-4, but I put in red there the verses that really speak to the qualifications. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility, that is, of looking out after the distribution of the food for the widows, we will turn this responsibility over to them, and will give our attention to the prayer and ministry of the word. That was the apostle speaking. The passage in 1 Timothy, in the same way, the deacons are to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, not pursuing dishonest gain. Again, these are very similar qualifications as we went over for the elders earlier, but the one, I think, in essence, the one difference between elders and deacons in these verses in Timothy are that it doesn't mention teaching in reference to the deacons where it does for the elders. I highlighted in red there verse, I believe it's 11, that in the same way women are to be worthy of respect, not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything, because that's the verse that relates to deaconesses specifically. The two other verses that are listed there in the Constitution but not spelled out are Titus 2, 3, and 4, which relate to deaconesses. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the word of God. And in a similar manner, in 1 Peter 3, 3 and 4, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. And so those verses outline the type of people that we are looking to recognize as deacons and deaconesses, the people that are carrying out the ministry of our church. Those are the kind of people that we want to recognize as being official leaders, so to speak. And when I say leaders, maybe that's not the right word, but they are officials of the church, I guess you would say. We're recognizing them as being official parts of our church structure, and they will be appointed by the Council of Elders to lead specific areas of ministry. On the other hand, it isn't going to be a layer of bureaucracy over people doing ministry, but rather we're looking at recognizing people that are already doing ministry as being deaconesses and deaconesses. And I guess maybe the simplest way to explain that would be, maybe because I work with Awana, but we aren't going to have a deacon appointed to oversee Oscar and Awana. Oscar would be the deacon that would be in charge of Awana. That's his ministry. He's very good at it, and he will be the person that will be appointed to lead that ministry. I had in my head another example. Now it escapes me, but in other words, there might be deacon or deaconesses that are involved in the worship ministry that would be appointed as deacon and deaconesses to lead that part of the ministry as well. So it's not a layer of bureaucracy over the people, but rather it will be the people that are doing those things that will be recognized as the leaders and the people that will be responsible to the Council of Elders in doing those areas of ministry. They will be organized into leadership teams, and we'll get to that a little bit later, and they would serve unlimited 2-year terms. So we gave it 2-year terms so that if you're appointed to one of those positions, it doesn't become a case of where you're there for life, potentially, but rather that every 2 years you will have a graceful chance to say, no, I'd rather not continue doing this. I mean, obviously you do any time, but sometimes if there's not a set break point, you feel a little awkward stepping down. And so the 2-year term idea is to give those people the chance to evaluate themselves, as well as for the council to also evaluate too whether there needs to be a change in things as well. But it will be an unlimited number, so that because every 8 years we don't want to be looking for a new Awana commander, for example, because that's a specific gift to be able to do that and do it as well as Oscar does it anyway. We also, this is where we have the ministry staff, so it would be the positions like the executive minister that we're looking at for Ryan to be filling. For example, a youth minister, a children and family and children ministries minister, perhaps a worship minister. Those might all be staff positions that at some point in time we will be looking at having, and that they would be considered at this. So they would be looking at having the qualifications of deacon or deaconesses. These positions would be created by the Council of Elders, and potentially dismissed by the Council of Elders, but the candidates would be approved initially by the congregation as it outlined here. The leadership teams are going to be responsible for specific areas of ministry. Each leadership team would be led by an elder or a pastor, and that they would be composed of elders, in some cases the ministers, or deacons or deaconesses. This is a chart of how that might appear if you're oriented to organizational charts, so that they would be under the Council of Elders. I didn't name those ministry or leadership teams because I don't think we have them nailed down exactly what they would be. One pattern would be a worship leadership team, an instruction leadership team, evangelism, and now the fourth one. I was going to have them written down. Now I don't have it in front of me. Fellowship, yeah. Those are the ones that we've discussed so far, but we haven't completely nailed that down. But the one that is nailed down is the administration team, which is to organize the church ministry, establish the policies and procedures, in essence, oversee the business part of the church, and to maintain church records. Their authority is delegated by the Council of Elders, so in essence, they can be overruled by the Council of Elders. But the purpose of this is to delineate the business purposes so that the Council of Elders isn't bogged down in the business. That's one of the things we're trying to avoid now, is that the pastors and deacons are all part of the current church council, and so they get involved in all the discussions about all the business aspects of the church, whether they want to be or not, sometimes. And so they are, in essence, spending a lot of time in meetings that perhaps they really wouldn't need. That decision-making authority could be delegated to another group of people. And so there will be 2 elders on this administrative team, the elder of administration and an assistant elder of administration. The church secretary will also be on this team, and this church secretary will be the secretary of this administration team as well as the secretary of the congregation. In other words, when the congregation's sitting, this person would also be the person taking the minutes there. So in other words, it would be the position that Julia currently holds now. The church treasurer also sits on this team, and that would be, as it is now, Susan, our treasurer. And then there would be 3 or more deaconesses and deaconesses appointed to this team. And these folks would also be the corporate officers for the corporation. So the elder of administration will be, in essence, the chief administrative officer, and they will be the legal representative of the church, like our church chairman is now. Now, I do want to point out, this would be analogous to our church chairman in that they would be the legal representative for the church. On the other hand,